Okay, here we are.
Hi, Sir Hawkins. Odie Hawkins.
Well, since we've been married for 12 years, you can just call me Odie.
Okay.
You don't have to call me Mr. Hawkins anymore.
Why, thank you.
After 12 years,
So generous.
I think you can call me Odie.
You and the American Taliban.
Sir is cool too. If you insist. Sir Odie, what can I say? I love you. And
I love you.
anything you do is wonderful.
Why, thank you, my love.
I'd like to start this series of readings off with a brief explanation of what it is we're about to do.
Okay.
I think in one of the previous things, I mentioned something about my lack of respect for the Transylvanian Beowulf stories that have to do with other people in Europe with their cold castles and all of that.
Right.
So I decided to write a series of books based in something that I call the Pan-African occult.
Right.
And for some, there may be no greater necessity to say anything other than that, Pan-African occult.
Mm-hmm.
So, by way of getting into it, I wrote a book called The Snake Doctor.
Okay.
The
Hold
Snake
for a
Doctor.
second. You tilted a little bit. You're right there. That's
Yes,
fine.
okay. The Snake Doctor, incidentally, the cover photo was made by one notorious Zola Salena-Hawkins
And
of a friend of ours named Bahati, which means
try to bring it, push it a little bit back towards your body and turn it
which means
facing the light more. That's it.
lucky in Swahili. Bahati.
Bahati. Got it.
It didn't take very much
Okay.
persuasion for Zola to get him to pose for the cover photo, one that we've been very pleased with, incidentally, and has attracted a lot of welcome attention. And by way of explanation, I dedicate this book to the first African Tarzan, not Johnny Vicey Miller or the rest of the white guys swinging through the jungles, screaming their brains out and doing whatever they do in their loincloths in malaria country. We don't want to get into the whole cultural malfeasance involved with the thing. But a story about a filmmaker who wants to make a film about his grandfather and what his grandfather has seen in his life. And I thought that the best place to start this would be in Africa,
Okay.
which is where too seldom films about us are made. And I really think there's a dreadful need to start off making African American films. Put a hyphen between that. So we would both have some relationship to where it is we came from and some relationship to where we are.
Yeah.
Both with America and with Africa.
Okay.
It's sort of a circular thing in my head. I'm going to read the first 6 chapters, which will be very short and punchy, unlike the long chapters for the previous reading I had, which was Sweet Peter Dita, long chapters. These will be short and to the point. So having given you that as a preamble, let's get into the Snake Doctor.
Okay.
The Snake Doctor.
Yeah, right. And?
No, my tongue is not split like a couple other people in politics or anything like that.
Oh, let's go on.
Especially
Let's go on.
El Tromboso. This is chapter 1 from The Snake Doctor. I think my great-grandfather Kwame was the first person I'd ever known personally to die. I was 10 years old. What do you know about death? What do you think about death at that age? I had seen animals here and there, but a dead person is totally a different thing. Great-grandfather was 104 when he died of natural causes. 104 seemed to me as old as a human being could be. Doing the math, I imagine him having 10 lifetimes plus 4 years before I was born. He was old when he died, but he never seemed to be that old when he was alive. Kofi, tell me what you learned in school today. He was always asking me about school, about how I felt about this and that. And I would sit there, and he would sit there in his favorite chair and give me his complete attention. That was one of the things I liked about visiting him. He was always interested in what I was interested in. So, you want to be a snake man, huh? That's what he called a herpetologist, a person who studies snakes, snake behavior. He was the first one in our family to find out about my interest in snakes. 104 years old. I stood at the side of his casket and stared at his profile. He seemed to be sleeping. He died of natural causes. That one puzzled me for a bit. I asked my father about it. I was always asking questions about something or another. Dad, if great-grandfather died of natural causes, what would an unnatural cause be? Well, a bullet through the head would be somewhat unnatural, don't you think? I thought my dad and his mom and dad, my paternal grandparents, were some of the smartest people on the planet. They had original answers to any question I asked them. Granddad Kofi and Grandma Njinga were as busy as two middle-aged people could be with their bookstore, but they always had quality time for me, no matter how busy they were. What's on your mind, young man? That was the great-grandfather Kofi and Grandma Njinga. You just set me up. Mom's parents, my maternal parents, grandparents, Minerva and Harvey, were quite different. It wouldn't take a genius to figure out that they were much more involved with things, with material stuff, rather than ideas. They always gave me presents. They're always giving me presents, things. I love them both very much, but there are times when I wish they would back away from the gift shop. Mom told me, that's the way they are, Kofi. That's the way they've always been. Mom and Dad, they named me Kofi after Granddad, and because I was born on Friday, are and have been the checks and balances in my life. Dad, the filmmaker, writer, producer, director. Mom, the writer. Like I said earlier, I was always asking questions about one thing or another, and I have to give them, Mom and Dad, my grandparents, Dad's side, credit for encouraging me to ask questions. Grandson, if you don't ask questions, people will assume that you know everything, just like all the rest of the young folks of these days. My great-grandfather had a very dry sense of humor, so dry it would make your cheeks pucker before you laughed. I had the questions and they had the answer. Or his dad must have told me a zillion times, if I don't have the answers to your question, we'll go to your mother. And if she doesn't have the answer, we might have to go to the library. I could count on my parents to supply me with answers to the most naive, most esoteric questions, except for my father when we got to snakes. I was always very interested in snakes for some reason. I couldn't explain where my interest came from, but it was there, full blown. I was fascinated by snake lore, the unusual, mainly evil history of snakes, how they made it, the ways they hunted for their food, but more than anything, their poisons. I knew, for example, that the venom from various snakes, like the king cobra, was being used to treat various neuromuscular disorders. 10 years old, and I was seriously thinking about a career in herpetology, specializing in the creative scientific use of snake venom to deal with Parkinson's, fibromyalgia, Alzheimer's, stuff like that. I was more than a little bit surprised to discover that my dad wasn't 100% behind me. Why herpetology, son? What can I say? I don't know, Dad. It's just something I'm interested in. Well, son, it's natural to be interested in lots of things when you're 10 years old. Why don't you feel around a bit? Explore a few other career fields before you settle into one specific groove. I nodded in agreement, but his attitude really puzzled me. Dad was usually so open to whatever I flunked at him. If I came to him and told him that I wanted to go skydiving, scuba diving, drive a truck for a living, and become a doctor, nurse, veterinarian, chef, whatever, he was always open to the idea. It took me a long time to find out why he wasn't enthusiastic about herpetology. Father Kojo. I would have been blind to not see that Kofi was interested in snakes from the time he could crawl. It would have been really hard for me to explain to him, to anybody, why I didn't want to discourage his interest in snakes. My dad, the bookstore owner, noticed Kofi's interest in snakes and was always giving him books about snakes on his birthdays, for Kwanzaa, whatever. I was really in a bind. I mean, how could I tell my dad, my son, my wife about my deal with Asiafo, the wizard? Okay, in the European zombie movies, right behind this, you would hear some spooky music. Woo! Here you hear drums.
Gotcha.
Asiafo, the wizard. And how a snake came to be the main character in the piece. I must have done a flashback about Asiafo, the wizard, and the deal I made with him for years. I'm 46 years old now, a successful writer, producer, director, got all of the goodies I think I want. And it may all stem from a deal I made with a guy in a forest in Ghana 20 years ago. Just for the record, my parents sponsored me to a trip to the motherland, to Ghana, West Africa, when I was 18 years old. Maybe they saw it as a rite of passage kind of thing. In any event, I went to the continent, as my grandfather Kwame used to call it. In our Afrocentric family, it was ordinary for one family member or another to be making a trip to Africa every year. Sometimes it would be family groups. Don't allow them to lock you outside of Africa, Kojo. They've been trying to do that ever since they brought us over here. That's what my grandfather used to say at least once a week. And my mom and dad weren't far behind. Kojo, you have to think about Africa. It has to be a part of your consciousness. Otherwise, you'll be caught up in this negative bag that so many of our young, and some not so young, African American sisters and brothers have been swept into. And we're not just simply talking about the ones who go around calling each other niggers. My family was a rock bed foundation for my Africanity, and I blessed them for that. My first trip to Ghana was a blast. All I need to do is sit still, daydream for a hot minute, and I'm back in Africa. The trip would have been a huge success if I had only done two things: met Comfort Lartey and Grace Vivian Hulawar. 18 years old, hormones racing like fire engines. I'm sure if it hadn't been for the packages of condoms that Mom and Dad insisted that I carry, I would have had at least 2 pregnant young women in Ghana. Yeah, Ghana. Ghana, West Africa really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. I got a chance to see, to experience what effect, for example, colonialism had on the African psyche. Never will forget the billboard with the blonde Jesus on Danquois Circle. The subservient ways many Africans behave whenever any European showed his face, the poverty, the malaria. Kojo, when you get to Africa, to Ghana, you'll have a few people attempt to make you feel inferior. Feel bad because you're an African American. Don't buy into it. Some Africans have an almost Japanese attitude toward us. Wow, Dad, you're a little bit far ahead of me. A Japanese attitude? Sounds crazy. Let me explain. Some, maybe many Japanese, even today, blame the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki for their misfortune, for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, karmically speaking. That's the Japanese attitude some Africans have toward us. The Africans in the diaspora, if your karma had been correct, you wouldn't have been carted off into slavery. That's like blaming the victim for being a victim. Hopefully you won't find as much of that attitude as your mother and I found the first time we tripped to West Africa. I could honestly say I didn't find the Japanese attitude to be as strong for me as it was for my parents, but I still felt tinges of it. I mean, why weren't we given a diaspora welcome instead of being directed to go stand in line with the rest of the Obrune, the Europeans? That really put a wild hair up my ass for a few minutes. I asked, because I always ask, whether, why aren't Africans from the diaspora given more preferential treatment? After all, we're returning to our ancestral home. I got a few fuzzy answers and one realistic reply. The realistic reply came from Comfort Larty, one of the young women I had seduced on my third day in the section of Accra called Osun. Kojo, you must look at it this way from our perspective. It doesn't matter that you're not fair-skinned and that you do not have curly hair. What matters is that you do not know which village your ancestors came from, and more importantly, where they are buried. What matters is that you do not speak Ga, Chi, Adangme, Nzema, Ebe, or any of the other languages in Ghana here. Would I receive greater acceptance if I spoke Ga, Chi, or Ebe? Probably not. I mean, at the end of the day, a language is just a language. It's the culture above and below the language that counts. It's not about color, it's about culture. So you're saying that I could never claim my African roots no matter what I did? I didn't say that. I'm just saying that the culture makes you a Ghanaian, a Nigerian, a Fon, or whatever. There are some Lebanese born in Ghana here who are more African than you could ever be. We call you a Bruni because that's what you are. If you walk like a duck, squawk like a duck, and act like a duck, then we must call you a duck. Understand me well, Kojo. There's nothing personal about this. You walk like an American, you talk like an American, so we call you American. So what's wrong with that? There's a whole lot wrong with that. Number one, it just kicks my African side completely to the curb. You say, forget about it, Comfort. It would take about 4 years of African, Caribbean, South, North African, South, North African American studies for you to understand what I'm trying to explain. Are we still going to see the Ghana National Dance Ensemble this evening? Yes, please. There was an awful lot about that 6 weeks away in Ghana that turned me on my ear. I knew when I got on the KLM flight back to Los Angeles at Kotoko Airport that I wanted to return to Ghana. End of chapter 1.
Oh.
which is only the beginning.
Oh.
No, there'll be more.
Okay.
Trust me.
Okay.
Because the chapters are short, and I'm trying to, oh, what is this delightful odor coming into my,
What is that? What kind of incense?
I like
That's
it,
good.
whatever it is.
Oh, okay. Pochuki, I think.
It's called aromatherapy, no doubt. Makes me feel better.
Aromatherapy. All right.
In any case, that's the beginning of the snake doctor,
Mhm.
and it's going to take a little while to find out why he would be called the snake doctor.
Or who would be called the snake doctor?
I'm not
And
going to
there's the
get
mystery of
I'm not
it
going
all.
to get into this.
There's the mystery of it all. All right.
Let's just keep it mysterious.
Yes. And so the snake doctor can be purchased.
This particular book, you mean?
Yes, it can be purchased at Author House or
Amazon.com?
at Amazon.com
How
or
about,
Barnes and Noble.
oh, yes, of course.
Of course.
The big
and-
bookstore.
Right, and it could, there we go. And what can be purchased also at your local bookstore. All you do is go in and say, I want a copy of The Snake Doctor by Odie Hawkins.
Okay, I would suggest that you also do it in another kind of way.
Uh-huh.
Give me the snake doctor! Give me the snake doctor! If you ain't got the snake doctor, I am not going to come here and buy any more books by Odie Hawkins.
There you go. And it is also an ebook. So, is
Don't do that. Don't do that.
enough. All right, until chapter 2. Looking forward to it.
It's
Thank
okay,
you.
you can.
He is looking at you, Odie, O'Day.
Oh, you got the last word in on that, didn't you? I was trying to say something, but I got snapped up. I didn't know what to do.